Hey guys, welcome back to Sleepy Holidays. Tonight we're going back to 1659, Massachusetts Bay Colony, Christmas morning. And here's the thing, if you got caught celebrating, you'd face a 5 shilling fine. That's like $100 today. Yeah, Christmas was literally illegal in New England for 22 years. The Puritans didn't just discourage it, they banned it completely, made it a crime. And the reasons why, well, that's a story worth losing sleep over. Let's find out what happened. Before we start, get comfortable. Pull those blankets up. Dim the lights if you haven't already. This story's going to take us through some pretty fascinating history, so settle in for the long haul. If you're new here, hit subscribe. These bedtime history stories drop every week. And hey, drop a comment. Where are you listening from tonight? What time is it where you are? I love hearing from you. All right, let's go back to a world that looked very different from ours. Chapter 1, A World Before Christmas. Picture this. It's 1620. The Mayflowers just landed. These aren't your typical colonists. These are Puritans, people who left England because the church wasn't pure enough for them. They wanted to strip away centuries of tradition, ceremony, ritual, get back to what they saw as true Christianity. No fancy robes, no elaborate services, no Christmas celebrations. They thought Christmas had become corrupted, pagan, a mockery of their faith, and they were about to do something about it. See, back in England, Christmas was intense. 12 days of feasting, drinking, partying. People dressed up like animals. They'd go door to door demanding food and ale. Sometimes things got rowdy. Really rowdy. The Puritans watched all this and thought, this isn't worship. This is chaos. December 25th. They couldn't even prove that was Christ's actual birthday. The Bible doesn't give a date. So why celebrate something that might be completely made up? Why participate in what looked like, well, like a pagan festival with a Christian name slapped on top? Their daily life reflected these beliefs completely. 5 in the morning, up for prayers. Work until sunset. More prayers. Maybe some Bible reading by candlelight. Sundays meant 3 hours of church, sometimes 4. No music unless it was psalm singing, no dancing, no games, no theater. They dressed in simple dark clothes, ate simple meals, worked hard, prayed harder. Everything had a purpose, and that purpose was serving God. Christmas parties, Christmas gifts, Christmas anything, that wasn't serving God. That was serving yourself, and that was dangerous. But here's where it gets interesting. Not everyone in the colony agreed. You had people who'd grown up with Christmas, who missed it, who thought maybe they could celebrate quietly, just a small gathering, maybe a special meal, nothing too fancy. But word gets around in a small community. Neighbors notice when you're not working on December 25th. They smell something special cooking. They see people gathering who don't usually gather. And in a place where everyone's watching everyone else for signs of moral failure, well, people talk. And when people talk, the authorities listen. The evidence is still there if you know where to look. Court records from the 1620s and 1630s, faded ink on old parchment. Thomas Morton fined for setting up a maypole and celebrating Christmas at his settlement in Quincy. The authorities called it reveling and riot. John Endicott, he actually chopped down Morton's maypole with his own hands, called it a heathen vanity. These weren't just religious disagreements, these were legal battles, cultural wars. And Christmas was caught right in the middle, with real people facing real consequences for what they did in their own homes. The meetings happened in secret, hushed conversations after evening prayers, maybe at the blacksmith's shop after everyone else had gone home, or in someone's kitchen, voices low, doors checked twice. They'd heard rumors. Other colonies were talking about making Christmas illegal entirely. Not just discouraged, actually illegal. With fines, with punishment. And some people thought, good, it was time to take a stand, to show the world what true Christianity looked like. Others worried, where would this end? What traditions would be next? But the momentum was building. You could feel it in the air. Think about the psychology here. These people had given up everything for their beliefs, left their homeland, crossed an ocean, buried family members in unmarked graves during that first terrible winter. They'd sacrificed comfort, safety, familiarity, all for the chance to worship God the way they thought was right. So when they saw people celebrating Christmas, it felt like betrayal, like mockery, like everything they'd suffered for was being tossed aside for a few hours of fun and games. Their response? Make it impossible to ignore, make it impossible to choose the easy path. The smell of pine needles was everywhere that December, not from Christmas trees, those weren't a thing yet in America, just from the forest pressing in around every settlement. Pine and wood smoke and that sharp, clean scent of snow that's about to fall. But there was something else in the air, too. Tension, fear, maybe. Change was coming. You could see it in how people talked to each other, how they avoided certain subjects, how they watched their neighbors just a little more carefully, how they measured their words. Even children picked up on it. Something was different. Something was about to shift. The secret celebrations were heartbreaking, actually. Families gathering behind shuttered windows, maybe sharing a piece of preserved fruit, maybe singing one quiet carol, children getting a small gift, maybe a carved wooden toy or a warm pair of mittens. Nothing elaborate, nothing that would draw attention, but meaningful, a way of holding on to something that felt important to them, something that connected them to the life they'd left behind. But even these small gestures carried risk, because someone was always watching. Someone was always ready to report what they'd seen, and the consequences were getting more serious. Here's what's wild about this. The Puritans weren't trying to be cruel. In their minds, they were saving souls, protecting their community from spiritual corruption. They genuinely believed that celebrating Christmas was dangerous, not just wrong, dangerous, like it could literally damn people to hell. So when they saw neighbors celebrating, they felt obligated to step in to save them from themselves. It was love in their understanding, tough love. The kind of love that says no to what you want and yes to what you need, even if you hate them for it, even if it tears the community apart. Winter was closing in around the colonies. 1658, turning into 1659, and with winter came that annual question, what do we do about Christmas? But this year felt different. The conversations were sharper, the positions more entrenched. Some people were talking about enforcement, real enforcement, not just social pressure or religious guilt, but actual laws, actual penalties, the kind of official response that would make celebrating Christmas not just wrong, but criminal. The wheels were turning in the Massachusetts General Court, and once they started turning, they were going to be very hard to stop. Children asked their parents why other families seemed sad in December, why their neighbors looked worried all the time, why people stopped talking when they walked into a room. The parents, what could they say? How do you explain to a 7-year-old that the thing they remembered loving might soon be forbidden, that the stories their grandmother told about Christmas back in England might become dangerous to repeat, that showing joy at the wrong time of year might get their family in trouble? Some parents tried to explain, others just changed the subject, hoped it would all blow over, hoped things would go back to normal. The anticipation was everywhere now, like waiting for a storm you know is coming, but can't quite see yet. People stocked up on supplies earlier than usual, finished their winter preparations ahead of schedule, made sure their wood piles were high, their root cellars full, because if Christmas became illegal, who knew what else might change? Who knew how the authorities might decide to interpret other traditions, other customs? Better to be prepared, better to keep your head down, better to make sure no one had any reason to look too closely at your family, at your choices, at your heart. And then 1659 arrived. Massachusetts Bay Colony. The General Court was in session. Representatives from every town, every settlement, serious men in dark clothes carrying the weight of their community's future. They had a decision to make about Christmas, about celebration, about what their new society would allow and what it would punish. The quill pens were ready, the ink was mixed, the parchment was waiting, and what they were about to write would change American Christmas forever. For 22 long years, there would be no Christmas at all. Chapter 2. When Christmas was convicted. December 1659, Boston. The streets are quiet, too quiet, because celebrating Christmas, that'll cost you 5 shillings. Yeah, you heard that right. Christmas is illegal, not discouraged, not frowned upon, illegal, with fines, with jail time, with court dates. The Massachusetts Bay Colony has officially declared war on December 25th. And this isn't some symbolic gesture, they mean business. Picture this. You wake up Christmas morning in Puritan Boston. No stockings, no feasts, no singing, nothing that even hints at celebration. Because somewhere in the shadows, the magistrates are watching, waiting, ready to drag you before a judge if you so much as hum a Christmas carol. This is religious enforcement at its most extreme, and it lasted 22 years, 22 Christmases, gone. The Puritans had their reasons. They'd studied their Bibles, searched every verse, and nowhere did they find December 25th mentioned as Christ's birthday. Know what they did find? Pagan festivals, Roman celebrations, winter solstice rituals. To them, Christmas wasn't Christian at all. It was contaminated, corrupted, a leftover from the old world they'd sailed across an ocean to escape. But here's what gets me. People celebrated anyway, quietly, behind closed doors, in whispered conversations. Families would gather, not for Christmas, but for, well, dinner. Just dinner. Nothing special about December 25th, except the extra candles, the special bread, the little gifts hidden where the children might find them. Pure coincidence, officer. Nothing to see here. The enforcement was real, though. Court records show dozens of arrests, 5 shillings for playing games on Christmas Day, 5 shillings for feasting, 5 shillings for any unnecessary merriment whatsoever. That's about 3 days' wages for a working man. The law didn't just threaten Christmas, it attacked your wallet, your livelihood, your ability to feed your family. John Wakeman learned this the hard way. Christmas Day, 1679. He's caught playing shuffleboard. Just a game, just some innocent fun with his neighbors. But fun on Christmas? That's illegal. The constables haul him to court. The judge looks down from his bench. Guilty. 5 shillings. Next case. Justice served. Christmas defeated. For now. The resistance grew slowly, carefully. Anglican families from England kept arriving. They brought different traditions, different interpretations of Scripture, different ideas about what Christmas could be. and they weren't afraid to challenge the ban, not openly, not foolishly, but steadily, persistently, like water wearing down stone. Change was coming. The Puritans could feel it. Ministers preached harder sermons. Magistrates issued stronger warnings. They could sense their control slipping. Every Christmas that passed brought more secret celebrations, more whispered carols, more hidden gifts, more families gathering for those mysterious December dinners that definitely weren't Christmas feasts. Definitely not. The authorities weren't buying it, but they couldn't arrest everyone. Samuel Sewall wrote about it in his diary. The tension in the streets, the way neighbors eyed each other suspiciously every December, who was celebrating, who was reporting, who could be trusted. Christmas had become a crime that split communities, friend against friend, neighbor against neighbor, neighbor against neighbor, is all over a date on the calendar. Then something shifted. 1681, a group of Anglican merchants openly celebrated Christmas in Boston. They held a service, sang hymns, exchanged gifts, right there in public. The authorities arrested them, sure, but the damage was done. The secret was out. Christmas wasn't just surviving in hidden corners, it was fighting back, demanding recognition, claiming its place. The cracks in the ban widened. New immigrants brought new customs. Trade with England brought new ideas. Young people, especially, started questioning why their parents lived in fear of a holiday, why 5 shillings could destroy a family's Christmas, why the government got to decide how they honored Christ's birth. The old certainties were crumbling. By the 1680s, enforcement became spotty, selective. The magistrates had bigger problems than Christmas celebrations. King Philip's War, political upheaval, colonial governance changes. 5 shillings for playing games suddenly seemed petty, outdated, a relic from a stricter, simpler time when the colony was smaller and more unified in its beliefs. The final blow came in 1681. The Massachusetts Bay Colony Charter was revoked. New leadership, new policies, new attitudes toward religious enforcement. The Christmas ban, well, it didn't officially end, it just faded, stopped being enforced, became one of those laws nobody remembered or cared about, like an old sword rusting in the corner. But the damage was done. An entire generation had grown up fearing Christmas, associating celebration with punishment, with shame, with hiding from authorities. That trauma didn't just disappear when the ban lifted, it lingered, shaped how New England approached holidays for decades. Christmas came back, but cautiously, quietly, still carrying the scars. Think about those 22 years, 22 Christmases where children learned to hide their joy, where families whispered prayers instead of singing carols, where the simple act of celebrating Christ's birth could land you in court. That's what happens when fear becomes law, when religious conviction becomes civil punishment. The ban officially ended, but Christmas in New England never fully recovered, not for generations. The Puritan suspicion of celebration, of excess, of joy itself that stuck around. Even today, you can trace New England's complicated relationship with Christmas back to those 22 years when the holiday was a criminal offense. Chapter 3, In the Shadows of Tradition. By 1660, something interesting was happening. The Christmas ban was still the law, still carried that 5 shilling fine, but people, well, people were getting creative. Behind closed doors, in basements, in the woods just outside town limits, they found ways, small ways, quiet ways. Because here's the thing about trying to ban joy, it doesn't really work. It just goes underground. Picture this. December 25th, 1662, Salem, Massachusetts. The constable's making his rounds, checking for any signs of celebration, any hint of Christmas cheer, but walk past the Hartwell cottage. Listen carefully, you might catch something. The faint sound of laughter, maybe a whispered song, the warm glow of extra candles through shuttered windows. Nothing you could prove, nothing you could find them for, but something was definitely happening inside. Sarah Hartwell kept a diary, hidden it for 3 centuries, found it in 1943 during renovations. December 25th, 1662, made the spiced toddy today. Mother's recipe. The children know not to speak of it outside these walls, but oh, how their eyes light up at the first taste of cinnamon and nutmeg. Small rebellions, sweet rebellions. The magistrates can ban our celebrations, but they cannot ban our memories. The spiced toddy thing was everywhere. Every family had their version. Hot cider with precious spices, smuggled in from merchant ships, hidden in root cellars, mixed by candlelight, passed down from grandmother to daughter in whispers. Because, see, they couldn't ban cider, couldn't ban spices, couldn't ban the act of warming your family on a cold December night. They just couldn't prove you were celebrating Christmas while you did it. Then there were the tokens, little carved wooden figures, hidden in sewing boxes, tucked behind loose floorboards. Children would carve them in secret. Crude little angels, rough wooden stars. Not decorations exactly, just wood scraps, practice pieces. But on December 25th, they'd appear on windowsills for just a few hours, then disappear again, like they were never there at all. Plausible deniability, the art of celebrating without celebrating without celebrating. Mary Fletcher's account book tells the story. December 1663, purchased 3 yards of red ribbon, for mending, of course. But here's the thing, her family didn't need mending that winter. The ribbon shows up again in her diary, tied around little Annie's wrist today. She says it makes her feel warm inside. Red ribbon on December 25th. Technically not a Christmas decoration, technically just fabric, but they both knew better. The singing was the riskiest part. Voices carry, neighbors talk, but they found ways around that too. Humming while they worked, whistling old melodies, teaching children songs as lullabies that just happened to be Christmas carols. Clever, right? How do you prosecute a mother for singing her baby to sleep, even if that lullaby sounds suspiciously like Silent Night? Well, that song wouldn't exist for another century anyway, but you get the idea. The Reverend Cotton Mather knew what was happening. His sermons got more desperate around December, more warnings, more threats. I know some among you harbor pagan longings in your hearts. He wasn't wrong, but knowing and proving are different things. And the people had gotten very, very good at the difference. They'd learned to celebrate in the spaces between laws, in the shadows of tradition. Thomas Brewer almost got caught, December 25th, 1664. He'd been carving a little wooden horse for his son. Just a toy, nothing suspicious, but he forgot himself. Started humming the holly and the ivy while he worked. His neighbor heard, mentioned it to the constable. Thomas spent 3 sleepless nights waiting for that knock on his door. It never came. Sometimes luck was all that stood between tradition and persecution. The children were the secret keepers. They understood the game instinctively. Don't talk about the special dinner at the widow Jenkins' house. Don't mention the extra candles at meeting. Don't tell anyone about the wooden angels hidden in the barn. Children who grew up keeping Christmas secrets learned early that joy sometimes required silence, that tradition sometimes meant danger. Heavy lessons for small hearts. Elizabeth Warren's letter to her sister in London, December 1665. The children ask why we cannot sing the old songs freely. How do I explain that their joy is seen as sin, that their laughter might bring judgment? I tell them we carry Christmas in our hearts now, that some day perhaps we might carry it in the light again. Until then, we whisper our traditions like prayers. Hidden faith, hidden hope. But here's what's interesting. By 1665, the whispered traditions were getting bolder. Not much, but enough to notice. Longer gatherings, more families involved, word spreading through careful networks. Come to our house after evening meeting. Bring the children. We have stories to tell. Stories that just happen to involve wise men and shining stars. Stories that filled hearts with something the magistrates couldn't quite identify or prosecute. The turning point came in winter of 1666. A constable's report survives. Noticed unusual activity on December 25th. Smoke from chimneys suggesting extra cooking. Children seeming particularly cheerful. Families gathering for unclear purposes. However, no direct evidence of Christmas celebration could be obtained. Translation: they knew, everyone knew, but the game had shifted. The shadows were getting crowded with tradition. Samuel Sewell's private diary captures the moment perfectly. The people grow weary of this burden. They comply with the letter of the law while violating its spirit. I fear we have created not righteousness, but rebellion. Secret rebellion, the kind that festers and grows stronger in darkness. Even the magistrates were starting to see it. You can't really kill Christmas. You can only make it more precious by trying. The merchants noticed first. December sales picking up again. Not dramatically, but ribbons and spices, candles and carved toys. Little luxuries that shouldn't matter in a Puritan household, but did. Store owners started stocking extra inventory around December, not for Christmas officially, just meeting increased demand for winter necessities. Everyone understood the code. Everyone played along. Commerce was quietly undermining conscience. By 1667, the shadows were full of celebration. Secret, careful, whispered celebration, but celebration nonetheless. The ban was still law, the fines still real, but something had shifted. Christmas wasn't dying, it was adapting, learning to survive, growing stronger in secret than it ever was in the open. The traditions were winning, slowly, quietly, but winning, and soon, very soon, they'd step back into the light. Chapter 4: The Great Thaw. 1681. Something's changing in Massachusetts. You can feel it in the air. The rigid grip of the Puritan magistrates starting to crack. Not breaking, not yet, but cracking, like ice on a pond when spring finally comes. The younger generation's growing restless. They've heard stories from England, from other colonies, places where Christmas isn't a crime, where December 25th doesn't mean hiding behind shuttered windows. The first sign? Horse hooves. Clatter, clatter, clatter down King Street in Boston. But different now. Not the urgent rhythm of magistrates hunting Christmas criminals. These are merchants, traders, people with money to make. And money doesn't care about religious ideology. Money wants to flow, wants to trade, wants to celebrate, if celebrating brings profit. The sound of commerce is drowning out the sound of persecution. Governor Simon Bradstreet's getting old, 78 years old. The fire in his belly for prosecuting Christmas celebrants, it's dimming. His deputies notice. They start looking the other way when someone lights an extra candle on December 25th, when a family shares a slightly larger meal than usual, when children play a little too loudly in the street. Small things, tiny cracks, but cracks nonetheless. The merchants are pushing back harder now. Samuel Sewall writes in his diary about the changing mood. The people grow restless, he notes. Trade suffers when neighbors fear to visit, because that's what happened. Families stopped visiting each other entirely in December. Too risky, too easy for someone to misconstrue a friendly dinner as Christmas celebration. Business relationships crumbled. The economy felt the chill of religious extremism. 1682. A ship arrives from London carrying something revolutionary, English newspapers. And guess what they're full of? Christmas celebrations. King Charles II throwing lavish Christmas parties. The aristocracy exchanging gifts openly. Christmas services in churches packed to the rafters. The contrast is stark, embarrassing even. Massachusetts looks backward, primitive, out of touch with the empire it's supposed to represent. The young adults who grew up under the Christmas ban, they're having children now, and they're asking hard questions. Why can't my daughter have a doll for Christmas? Why must we pretend December 25th doesn't exist? Their parents, the original Puritans, don't have good answers anymore. The theological arguments that seemed so clear in 1659 feel fuzzy now, outdated, like yesterday's sermon. Here's where it gets interesting. The congregational ministers start quietly disagreeing with each other. Increase Mather holds the hard line. Christmas is still pagan, still forbidden, but younger ministers like Samuel Willard whisper different ideas. Maybe, maybe celebrating Christ's birth isn't inherently evil. Maybe it's the excess they should target, not the recognition. Maybe compromise is possible. Cracks in the religious establishment. The tavern keepers are the first to test the waters. December 24th, 1683. The Blue Anchor in Boston serves warm cider and meat pies. Nothing explicitly Christmas related, but everyone knows. The magistrates hear about it. They debate prosecution. The debate lasts 3 hours. In the end, no action. Too much public sympathy for the tavern keeper. Too many powerful citizens drinking that cider. Change happening at street level. The penalties get lighter. Remember Joseph Belcher from earlier chapters? Fined 5 shillings for Christmas celebration in 1672. His son gets caught doing the same thing in 1684. The fine? 1 shilling. The magistrate even looks apologetic, handing down the sentence. Times are changing, he mutters. God help us. Times are changing. Whether he means that as prayer or curse, hard to say. The real breakthrough comes from an unexpected source. Pirates. Yeah, you heard that right. Pirates captured off the Massachusetts coast are thrown into Boston jail in December 1684. And these pirates, they sing Christmas carols, loudly, drunkenly. The guards don't stop them, can't really punish someone already awaiting execution for singing. But those carols drift through the prison walls into the streets. People hear them, remember them. 1685. King James II takes the English throne. He's Catholic. Suddenly the political landscape shifts completely. Massachusetts realizes they can't afford to look too Protestant, too extreme. Royal favor matters. Trade relationships matter. And King James, he loves Christmas, celebrates it openly, demands his colonies show proper respect for royal customs. Politics trumps theology. Every single time. Children born after 1670 have no memory of Christmas celebration, but they have curiosity. They ask their grandparents about the old days in England, about Christmas puddings and Boxing Day and midnight services. These conversations happen in whispers at first, then normal voice, then openly, oral history preserving what law tried to kill. Memory is stronger than legislation, always has been. The merchants organize quietly. They don't call it Christmas planning, they call it winter inventory preparation. Special orders for December, extra candles, extra meat, extra imported goods, luxury items that haven't been seen in Massachusetts for decades, silk ribbons, crystal glasses, things that suggest celebration. The black market economy of forbidden joy slowly becoming not so forbidden anymore. December 25th, 1686. Sarah Mitchell steps out of her house in Salem. She's wearing her best dress. Her children are clean, well fed, happy. A neighbor sees her and nods. "Good morning, Sarah." She takes a breath, heart pounding. Then she says it, the forbidden words. "Merry Christmas, Thomas." He doesn't report her. He doesn't look shocked. He smiles back. "Merry Christmas, Sarah." Revolution in 2 words. That afternoon, more people try it. "Merry Christmas" echoes through Boston streets for the first time in 27 years. Some whisper it, others say it normally. A few even call it out loudly, defiantly. The magistrates hear about it. They meet in emergency session. The discussion is heated. The verdict? No prosecutions. Too many violators. Too much public sentiment. The law is breaking down. Christmas is winning. By evening, candles flicker in windows throughout the colony. Not hidden anymore. Not shameful. Families gather around dinner tables laden with food they haven't prepared in decades. Children laugh without fear. Adults remember what celebration feels like. The great thaw has begun. What took 27 years to freeze is melting in a single day. Christmas is coming home to America. Finally. Chapter 5. A Warm Embrace. December 1681. Boston. Something's different this year. You can feel it in the air, people walking slower past the churches, lingering near doorways, whispering to neighbors, because for the first time in 22 years, Christmas isn't illegal anymore. The law that made celebrating a crime? Gone. The fines, the arrests, the fear? Over. And what happens when you tell people they can finally do something they've been dreaming about for decades? Pure joy. Picture this morning, snow falling thick over Boston Common, but instead of empty streets, there are footprints everywhere. Families bundled in wool coats, kids running ahead, adults calling out greetings to neighbors they haven't spoken to openly about Christmas in years. The silence is broken, not just by voices, but by something else entirely. Something that's been missing from this city for so long. Church bells, actually ringing on Christmas morning. Can you imagine that sound? The first bell starts at Old North Church. Then another joins in from across town. Then another. Within minutes, it's like the whole city is singing, brass and bronze echoing off cobblestones, bouncing between buildings, rolling across the harbor. People stop walking just to listen. Some are crying, others laughing, many doing both. Because this sound, it means freedom. It means they don't have to hide anymore. They don't have to pretend Christmas doesn't exist. In the courtyards behind houses, you hear something new, laughter that doesn't get cut short. Children singing carols without looking over their shoulders. Adults sharing stories their grandparents told them about Christmas celebrations from the old country. Stories they've kept secret for decades. Now they're spilling out like water from a broken dam. All that suppressed joy, all that hidden tradition, it's finally safe to share. And people are making up for lost time. The streets are packed, not just with people going to church, but with families visiting each other, carrying small gifts, sharing food, doing all the things they couldn't do openly before. You see neighbors who barely spoke during the band years suddenly embracing in the snow, exchanging Christmas greetings like they're testing out words they haven't been allowed to say. Merry Christmas, words that could have cost them 5 shillings just last year. Now they're free. But here's what gets me about this moment. It's not just celebration, there's something deeper happening. People are remembering, honoring the ones who kept Christmas alive in secret, the families who whispered prayers behind closed doors, the grandmothers who taught carols to children in hushed voices, the men who faced fines and jail time for simply saying Merry Christmas. This freedom didn't come from nowhere. It was preserved by quiet acts of courage. In kitchens across Boston, women are pulling out recipes they haven't dared to make in decades. Christmas puddings, mince pies, special breads their mothers taught them before the ban. The smells are drifting through windows, mixing with the cold air and snow. It's like the whole city is waking up from a long sleep, rediscovering tastes and traditions that were forced underground, and every bite feels like victory. Every shared meal feels like freedom. The children, they're the ones who really get to you. Kids who've never experienced a real Christmas. Not legally, anyway. Now they're seeing adults openly happy about something for the first time, watching their parents laugh and sing and celebrate without fear. Some of these kids are teenagers. They've lived their entire lives under the ban. This is their first taste of what Christmas was supposed to feel like, and they're absolutely mesmerized. There's this moment in the afternoon when the snow stops falling and the sun breaks through. The whole city looks different, not just because of the white covering everything, but because of the people. They're moving differently, standing taller, smiling at strangers. The fear is gone. That constant looking over your shoulder, it's just not there anymore. For the first time in 22 years, Christmas belongs to everyone, out in the open, no hiding required. Some of the older folks, they're having the hardest time with it, not because they don't want to celebrate, but because they can barely believe it's real. You see them hesitating before saying Christmas greetings out loud, checking around them first. The fear runs that deep. Decades of conditioning don't disappear overnight, but their children and grandchildren are pulling them forward, encouraging them to embrace this freedom, teaching them it's safe now, really truly safe. By evening, the taverns are full of people sharing stories, not just about this Christmas, but about all the ones they missed, all the celebrations they had to hide, the close calls with authorities, the fear of getting caught, but also the small rebellions, the families who celebrated anyway, in secret, the communities that found ways to honor Christmas despite the law. These stories pour out like they've been bottled up for decades, which they have. There's something bittersweet about all this joy, because mixed in with the celebration is grief for all the Christmases that were stolen, all the family traditions that were broken, all the people who died during the ban years without ever seeing Christmas return to New England, the ones who kept the faith but didn't live to see this day. Their memory hangs over everything, making this freedom feel even more precious, even more worth protecting. As night falls, something magical happens. Candles appear in windows throughout the city, not hidden this time, not quickly extinguished if someone walks by. These lights shine openly, proudly, declaring to the world that Christmas lives here now. Each flame is like a small act of defiance against the years of suppression, a quiet way of saying we remember what was taken from us, and we're never letting it happen again. The churches are packed for evening services, standing room only. People who haven't been able to worship Christmas openly in their entire adult lives are finally experiencing what their parents described from before the ban: the hymns, the readings, the sense of community celebration, voices joining together without fear. It's overwhelming. Grown men are weeping. Women are clutching their children close, whispering, "This is what freedom looks like. This is what we fought to preserve." Late that night, as families head home through the snow-covered streets, there's this sense of something being restored. Not just Christmas as a holiday, but Christmas as a symbol of everything the Puritans tried to control: personal faith, individual choice, the right to celebrate what matters to you. This wasn't just about one day on the calendar, it was about the freedom to live according to your own conscience. And that freedom, it feels sweeter after being denied for so long. This Christmas of 1681 becomes the foundation for everything that follows. The beginning of Christmas as we know it in America. Not perfect, not without complications, but free, open, belonging to everyone who wants to claim it. The warmth of that embrace, it spreads far beyond Boston, far beyond New England. It becomes part of the American story. The idea that some freedoms are worth preserving, even when they're dangerous to hold on to, even when celebrating them could cost you everything. Chapter 6: Christmas Regained. 1681, the ban's lifted, and suddenly Christmas explodes back to life across New England, like a dam bursting. 22 years of suppressed celebration comes pouring out. Families who'd whispered carols behind closed doors now sing them from their doorsteps. Children who'd never seen a decorated tree stand wide-eyed as their parents drag evergreen branches inside. The smell of cinnamon and nutmeg fills kitchens again. Christmas is home. Picture Boston, December 1682, windows glowing amber against the snow, families working together, hanging dried apple slices and bits of cloth on pine boughs. Nothing fancy yet, no glass ornaments or tinsel, just simple decorations made from whatever they had: scraps of bright fabric, strings of cranberries, maybe a wooden star carved by Dad. The house smells like pine sap and wood smoke, and for the first time in decades, it feels like Christmas should feel. The kitchens, oh, the kitchens come alive. Mothers teaching daughters recipes they'd kept secret for years: plum puddings, mince pies, gingerbread shaped like little people, honey cakes that take 2 days to make properly. The whole house fills with steam and sugar and spice. Kids hovering around, stealing tastes when they think nobody's looking. These aren't just desserts, they're acts of rebellion. Sweet, delicious rebellion against everything the Puritans tried to crush. Gift giving starts small, really small. A hand-carved wooden toy, a knitted scarf, maybe an orange if you're lucky. Oranges were exotic back then. Expensive, special. Kids would save the peels for weeks just to smell that citrus. Adults exchange practical things: a new pair of mittens, a book of poems, a small bottle of molasses. Nothing fancy, but the act itself, the giving, that feels revolutionary, like reclaiming something precious that was stolen. Christmas Eve, families gathering in front of fireplaces. Someone pulls out a fiddle that's been hidden in the attic for 20 years. Tentative at first. A few notes of the holly and the ivy, then stronger, bolder. Voices join in, quietly at first, then building, harmonies weaving together like threads in a tapestry. The music fills the room, spills out into the street. Other families hear it, start singing along from their own homes. The whole neighborhood singing. Street vendors return, chestnuts roasting over small fires. The smell, God, that smell. Sweet and smoky and warm. People gathering around these little stands, coins in their pockets, breath visible in the cold air. Kids begging their parents for just one handful. The vendors smile, toss in an extra chestnut or two. Everyone's in a good mood. There's something in the air, something that's been missing for too long. Joy, pure, uncomplicated joy. Church services change too. Slowly, carefully. Ministers who spent decades preaching against Christmas, well, some of them start to soften. They add a few hymns, nothing too elaborate, nothing the old hardliners would call pagan. But O come, Emmanuel, creeps back in. Silent Night won't be written for another century, but the spirit's there, that sense of wonder, of something holy happening. Even the sternest Puritans have trouble arguing with that feeling. Windows. This might sound weird, but windows become important. Families start putting candles in them. One candle, maybe two. Not a big display, just enough light to say we're celebrating. Walking down a street at night, seeing house after house with those little flames flickering. It's like a secret code, a signal. We're not hiding anymore. We're not ashamed. This is Christmas, and we're claiming it back, one candle at a time. The stories return. Grandparents who remember Christmas before the ban, they start talking, telling their grandchildren about the old ways, how families used to gather, what the celebrations looked like. These kids are hearing about Christmas for the first time, really. Wide eyed, leaning in close. Tell me about the Christmas goose, Grandpa. What's with sailing? The oral tradition, broken for 22 years, starts to heal. Memory by memory, story by story. Christmas morning, 1683. A little girl wakes up to find a rag doll on her pillow, hand sewn by her mother, working by candlelight after everyone went to bed. The doll has a dress made from scraps, button eyes, yarn hair. It's not much by today's standards. But to this kid, it's magic, pure magic. She'll keep that doll for the rest of her life, pass it down to her own daughter. Christmas is becoming a tradition again. The feasts grow more elaborate each year. What started as simple family dinners become multi-day celebrations. Roasted goose when they can afford it, ham when they can't, vegetables preserved from the summer harvest, apple cider, warm and spiced, tables stretched with extra boards to fit everyone, cousins and neighbors, and family friends. The dining room packed, voices overlapping, children running between the adults' legs. Chaos, beautiful, joyful chaos. The kind the Puritans hated, the kind that makes Christmas, Christmas, Christmas carols in the streets, not organized choirs, just people singing. A group of teenagers walking home from church, voices carrying in the cold air. God rest ye merry gentlemen. Shopkeepers humming while they work. Kids making up their own Christmas songs, nonsense words, but perfect melodies. The town fills with music again, spontaneous, unplanned, unrehearsed. Music that bubbles up from pure happiness. The Puritans tried to silence this, but joy finds a way. By the 1690s, Christmas markets appear. Small ones, a few stalls in the town square, handmade toys, fresh bread, ribbons and small trinkets. Nothing fancy, but the fact that they exist at all, that's huge. People browsing, comparing prices, haggling good-naturedly, children pressing their faces against stall windows, pointing at things they want. The commerce of Christmas returning, not the crazy consumer frenzy we know today, just normal Christmas shopping, simple and sweet and human. Christmas Eve services become beautiful, packed churches, candlelight flickering across congregation faces, ministers who once banned Christmas now leading prayers of gratitude. The Nativity story told without fear, without apology, children in simple costumes acting out the birth of Jesus. Mary and Joseph and baby Jesus, surrounded by shepherds with towel headbands and bathrobes. Nothing professional, everything heartfelt. This is what Christmas was always supposed to be about: family, faith, love, wonder. The transformation takes decades, but by 1700, New England Christmas looks normal, familiar. Families decorating trees, kids leaving shoes by the fireplace, hoping for small gifts, mothers baking traditional recipes passed down through generations, fathers carving wooden toys in their workshops, the whole rhythm of the season, from Advent through Epiphany. Christmas has found its footing again. The Puritan experiment failed. Love won. Joy won. Christmas came home. Here's what gets me about this story: 22 years. Nearly a generation of kids grew up without Christmas. But the moment the ban lifted, it all came flooding back. Every tradition, every song, every recipe, hidden, not lost, passed down in whispers and secret celebrations. Because some things are bigger than laws, bigger than governments. Christmas isn't just a holiday, it's a feeling, and feelings can't be banned. Chapter 7: The Echoes of the Past. By 1681, the ban was over. Christmas was legal again. But here's what happens when you force people to abandon something they love for 22 years. The wounds don't just heal overnight. Entire generations had grown up hiding their celebrations and whispering about wassail bowls behind closed doors, treating holly sprigs like forbidden treasure. Now suddenly, you could celebrate openly again, but the damage was already done. Think about it. Your grandfather remembered when Christmas was illegal. Your parents grew up never learning the old songs, never seeing a proper feast. The traditions that took centuries to develop, they'd been severed, cut clean through. Some families tried to pick up where they'd left off decades earlier. Others didn't even know where to start. The collective memory of how to celebrate Christmas had massive gaps, empty spaces where joy used to be. But something interesting happened in those first years. After the ban lifted, people didn't just go back to celebrating Christmas the same way their great grandparents had. They celebrated it harder, with more intention, more gratitude, like someone who'd been holding their breath for 2 decades and could finally exhale. Every carol felt precious. Every shared meal felt like an act of defiance against the ghosts of Puritan control. The children born in the 1680s and 1690s, they were the first generation to experience Christmas without fear. No looking over their shoulders for magistrates, no worrying about fines or public humiliation. But their parents remembered. Their grandparents definitely remembered. Their grandparents definitely remembered. So these celebrations had this undercurrent of not taking anything for granted. Christmas wasn't just a holiday anymore. It was proof that freedom could return, that joy could survive persecution. The Puritan influence didn't vanish overnight, though. Even with Christmas legal again, there was still this cultural hesitation, like people weren't quite sure how far they could push it. Some communities celebrated quietly, others went all out, almost rebelliously festive. You could see the tension everywhere, families torn between embracing the holiday and respecting the more conservative members who still viewed excessive celebration as spiritually dangerous. What's fascinating is how the ban actually changed Christmas itself. The holiday that came back wasn't identical to what had been outlawed decades earlier. It was different, more subdued in some ways, more intense in others. The community feast traditions had been broken. The wassailing had mostly disappeared, but new customs emerged, quieter ones, more family focused. Christmas was rebuilding itself from the inside out, shaped by the trauma of its own suppression. Churches faced their own complicated relationship with the returning holiday. Some ministers grudgingly acknowledged Christmas, others embraced it fully, perhaps overcompensating for the years of denial. But there was still this underlying theological tension. The same questions that had sparked the original ban lingered. Was celebrating Christ's birth too close to pagan revelry? Where was the line between appropriate worship and dangerous excess? These debates continued for generations. The merchants, though, they figured things out quickly. By the early 1700s, Christmas was becoming commercialized in ways it never had been before the ban, almost like the suppressed demand had built up pressure for decades and was finally bursting free. Special foods, seasonal goods, imported treats that had been forbidden luxuries. The market for Christmas was stronger after the Prohibition than it had ever been before. Scarcity had created desire. Children who grew up in those post-ban decades had a unique relationship with Christmas. Their parents would tell them stories about the time when celebrating was illegal, about neighbors who were fined for hanging evergreen boughs, about the courage it took to sing carols quietly in locked houses. These kids understood something that modern children never will, that Christmas wasn't guaranteed, that joy was fragile, that traditions could disappear if you didn't protect them. The generational divide was real. Older adults who remembered the ban often celebrated Christmas with a kind of grateful restraint. They'd lived through the loss once and didn't want to risk it again, but their children and grandchildren, they celebrated with abandon. For them, Christmas wasn't just permitted, it was reclaimed territory. Every decoration was a small victory. Every feast was proof that the old fears had been conquered. Some towns developed entirely new Christmas traditions during those recovery years. Since the old customs had been interrupted, communities invented fresh ones, different ways to mark the season that felt both respectful and joyful. These weren't ancient practices passed down through centuries. They were born from the specific experience of having Christmas taken away and given back. They carried the weight of that history in every ritual. The psychological impact ran deeper than most people realized at the time. Entire families had internalized the idea that celebration was somehow shameful, that joy needed to be justified, that pleasure was spiritually suspicious. Even decades after the ban ended, you could see traces of this conditioning. Adults who celebrated Christmas but felt guilty about enjoying it too much. Children who learned to temper their excitement just in case. By the mid-1700s, Christmas in New England looked completely different than it had in the early 1600s. The ban had created an entirely new holiday culture, more private, more family-centered, less community-focused, but also more precious, more intentional. People who celebrated Christmas in 1750 understood its fragility in ways that people in 1650 never had. They'd learned not to take their joy for granted. The irony wasn't lost on everyone. The Puritans had banned Christmas to purify their society, to focus on genuine spiritual devotion instead of frivolous celebration. But the ban had the opposite effect. It made Christmas more precious, more meaningful, more connected to ideas about freedom and resistance. The Prohibition had accidentally created exactly the kind of deep, intentional relationship with the holiday that the Puritans claimed they wanted all along. Writers and historians from that era began documenting the Christmas recovery. They understood they were witnessing something unique, a holiday rebuilding itself from cultural ashes. The poems, letters, and diary entries from those decades capture this sense of wonder, people marveling at being able to celebrate openly again, adults rediscovering childhood traditions they'd thought were lost forever, communities slowly remembering how to be joyful together without fear. And that's the lasting legacy of the Christmas ban. Not just that it happened, but how it changed the holiday forever. Christmas in America carries traces of that suppression even today. Our celebrations have this underlying intensity, this grateful awareness that joy isn't guaranteed. The Puritan ban failed to eliminate Christmas, but it succeeded in making it mean something deeper, something harder won, something worth protecting. Chapter 8: Spreading the Word. By the 1680s, something fascinating was happening. Christmas wasn't just surviving in secret anymore, it was actually growing, spreading, finding new converts in the most unexpected places. And it wasn't happening through grand proclamations or official church decisions. No, this was grassroots, person to person, kitchen to kitchen. One shared meal, one passed down recipe, one whispered invitation at a time. Picture this scene: December 1687, a grand dining room in Salem, candlelight flickering across polished wood. 23 people gathered around the longest table most of them had ever seen. Half are locals, half are visitors from England, Virginia, even the Caribbean. And right there, in the heart of Puritan territory, they're about to celebrate Christmas dinner together. The hostess is nervous. She's spent 3 days preparing, but it's not just about the food, it's about what this dinner represents. She's watched her Puritan neighbors, seen the longing in their eyes during the gray December days, heard the whispered questions. What if Christmas wasn't actually evil? What if they'd been wrong about this whole thing? Then comes the plum pudding, this massive steaming masterpiece that takes 4 people to carry to the table. Someone gasps, someone else laughs, and suddenly everyone's leaning forward, asking questions. How do you make it? Where did the recipe come from? Could you teach me? And just like that, tradition starts spreading like wildfire through New England. The gift exchanges were subtle at first. A small carved trinket, a jar of preserved fruit, a hand-knitted scarf. Nothing too flashy, nothing that would draw unwanted attention, but these tiny gestures carried enormous weight. They were proof that Christmas could exist here, that it could be quiet, meaningful, and completely separate from the wild celebrations the Puritans feared. The real game changers were the merchants. These guys traveled constantly, Boston to New York to Philadelphia. They'd seen Christmas celebrated everywhere else in the colonies. They knew it wasn't the devil's holiday the Puritans claimed. So they started talking, sharing stories, bringing back recipes, decorations, and most importantly, proof that Christmas could be respectable. By 1690, Christmas was leaking across New England's borders like water through a cracked dam. Connecticut first, then Rhode Island, each community adding their own twist, their own interpretation. Some focused on charity, others on family gatherings, but all of them were quietly, carefully, deliberately reclaiming Christmas from the ban that had tried to destroy it. The letters were crucial. People wrote to their relatives in other colonies, described their Christmas celebrations, shared recipes and traditions. These letters became informal handbooks, proof that you could celebrate Christmas without summoning demons or corrupting your soul. One letter might convince an entire extended family, and families talked to neighbors, neighbors talked to friends. Church leaders started noticing something strange. Their congregation seemed happier in December, more generous, more willing to help the poor. Wait, was this actually what Christmas was supposed to be about? Some ministers began privately wondering if they'd made a terrible mistake, if they'd thrown out something beautiful while trying to eliminate something corrupt. The children were the secret weapon. Kids who'd experienced Christmas elsewhere came to New England and couldn't understand why December was so gloomy. They asked innocent questions that cut straight to the heart of the issue. Why can't we celebrate Jesus' birthday? Why is happiness wrong? Why do other places get to have fun when we don't? Decorations appeared gradually, a sprig of evergreen here, a few extra candles there. Nothing too obvious, nothing that screamed Christmas celebration. But these small touches transformed homes, made December feel different, special, and neighbors noticed. They started asking questions. Where did you get those beautiful pine boughs? Could you show me how to arrange them? The most powerful advocates were the former skeptics, Puritans who'd tried Christmas and discovered it wasn't what they'd been told. These converts became evangelical about the holiday. They had credibility the outsiders lacked. When your stern neighbor suddenly started making mince pies and inviting people over that carried weight, that changed minds, economic factors helped too. Merchants realized Christmas meant increased sales. Innkeepers discovered holiday travelers needed rooms. Bakers found December could be their most profitable month. Suddenly, opposing Christmas wasn't just about religion anymore, it was about money, and money, as always, had a way of changing people's priorities. Regional variations started emerging. Boston Christmas looked different from Hartford Christmas. Salem had its own traditions. Springfield developed unique customs. This diversity was actually Christmas's strength. It proved the holiday could adapt, could become whatever a community needed it to be, could exist without threatening local values or beliefs. By 1695, the dam had completely burst. Christmas was everywhere in New England. Not the rowdy, drunken Christmas the Puritans had banned, but something entirely new, quieter, more family focused, more charitable, more spiritual. The Puritans had tried to kill Christmas and accidentally created a better version of it instead. The irony was incredible. The ban was officially lifted in 1681, but the real victory happened in dining rooms and kitchens across New England, person by person, meal by meal, gift by gift. Christmas had survived 22 years of prohibition by transforming itself, by becoming something the Puritans themselves could embrace. That's the power of tradition. It adapts to survive. Chapter 9: The Christmas Traditions We Know. Picture this. It's December 23rd. You're sitting on your living room floor, surrounded by glass ornaments and ribbons. Your fingers smell like pine sap. There's that particular quiet that only happens when snow's falling outside. This moment, your great-grandmother probably had one just like it. Same careful hands threading wire through delicate glass. Same concentrated silence. Same anticipation building. Those ornaments you're hanging, they carry stories. That red glass ball your mom bought in 1987, still going strong. The paper angel your kid made in second grade, crooked halo and all. We don't just decorate trees, we build museums of memory, one ornament at a time. Each piece holds a Christmas past, a face, a laugh, a moment when everything felt possible. Here's what gets me about ornament traditions. They're completely impractical. Who decided we needed to hang fragile glass spheres on dead trees once a year? Yet somehow, it works. Kids learn to be gentle. Adults remember being kids. Grandparents watch another generation discover the magic of unwrapping tissue paper to find something beautiful, something breakable, something worth protecting, pure ritual, pure love. Now about that Yule log. Most people think it's just a fancy dessert these days, rolled cake with buttercream and powdered sugar snow. But the original Yule log, that was serious business. Families would drag entire tree trunks into their hearths, oak if they could find it, something that would burn for days, 12 days if they were lucky. The Yule log ceremony had rules. Light it with a piece of last year's log. Never let it burn completely. Save some for next Christmas. Some families kept their Yule log traditions alive for generations. Same fireplace, same ritual, same prayers whispered over crackling wood. The log represented continuity, safety, home fires that never truly died. You can still feel echoes of that ancient Yule log ceremony. Every time you light a Christmas candle, every time you gather around a fireplace in December, your body remembers what your ancestors knew. Fire means survival. Warmth means family. Light conquers the longest night of the year. That's why we still crave flame at Christmas. It's cellular memory. Christmas dinner. Where do I even start? The recipes passed down like family heirlooms. Your grandmother's stuffing, your aunt's green bean casserole, that weird cranberry thing nobody likes but everyone expects. These aren't just meals, they're edible traditions, taste memories that transport you back to childhood with one bite. Specific, sacred, irreplaceable. The Christmas feast does something magical to time. Hours collapse into moments. Moments stretch into hours. You're 8 years old sneaking cookies. You're 18, home from college. You're 35, watching your own kids fight over wishbones. All happening simultaneously at one table. Past, present, and future, sharing the same meal. Same laughter, same love. Think about the sounds of Christmas dinner. Chairs scraping hardwood floors, wine glasses clinking, someone's uncle telling the same story for the 15th year, kids arguing over who gets the bigger slice, dishes clattering in the kitchen. These sounds, they're the soundtrack to belonging, to being known, to being home. No wonder we fight so hard to recreate them. Christmas stockings hung by the chimney. We still do this. Even apartments without fireplaces find somewhere to hang them. Command strips on walls, doorknobs, stair railings. Doesn't matter where. What matters is the gesture. The faith that something good might appear overnight. Hope made visible. Expectation turned into tradition. Magic we choose to believe in. The Christmas tree, standing in living rooms everywhere like a beautiful intruder. We bring wilderness indoors, decorate it with lights that would confuse any forest animal. Then we sit beside it and call it home. There's something primal about this, something that connects us to every human who ever found comfort beside evergreens in winter, ancient, necessary. Christmas carols floating through December air, silent night hummed in grocery store aisles, jingle bells sung by kids who can't carry a tune. These songs become the background music of memory. Years later, you'll hear 3 notes of White Christmas, and suddenly you're 7 again, walking through snow, believing in everything. Music holds time better than photographs. Here's what I've realized about Christmas traditions. They're not really about the things, the ornaments, the food, the songs. They're about the pausing, the noticing, the choosing to say, yes, this matters. Yes, we'll do this again. Yes, we'll keep this alive. And tradition is just love with a schedule, commitment wearing holiday clothes. The magic isn't in perfect execution, it's in the attempt, the trying, the showing up year after year with your imperfect offerings, burnt cookies, crooked ornaments, off-key carols, stories told one more time. This is how we build something bigger than ourselves. This is how we say we matter. And no, this is how we choose joy. Christmas traditions teach us about time, how it circles back, how it layers, how past and present dance together in December light. Your hands making paper snowflakes are the same hands your grandmother used. Your voice singing lullabies carries your mother's melody. We are all echoes of Christmas past, creating Christmas future. And maybe that's the real gift. Not what's under the tree, but what's around it. Not what we receive, but what we remember. Not what we buy, but what we become. Christmas traditions don't just mark time, they make time sacred. They take ordinary December days and fill them with extraordinary human love. That's the tradition worth keeping. Chapter 10, Tracing the Celebrations Back. So the ban's finally over. 1681, Christmas is legal again in Massachusetts. But here's the thing, people don't just flip a switch and start celebrating like nothing happened. 22 years is a long time. An entire generation grew up never seeing a Christmas tree, never hanging stockings, never singing carols. So, how do you rebuild a holiday from scratch? Where do you even start? The answer comes in pieces. Slowly, quietly at first, because even though it's legal now, there's still this lingering suspicion, this cultural hangover from the Puritan years. Some families start small. Maybe they cook something special on December 25th. Nothing fancy, just different. A way to mark the day without making a big show of it. Testing the waters, you know? The Dutch settlers in New York, they never stopped celebrating St. Nicholas Day, December 6th. While the Puritans were banning Christmas, the Dutch kept their Sinterklaas traditions alive. Children leaving shoes out for gifts, stories of the saint who left gold coins for poor families. This is where our modern Santa Claus actually begins, not in the North Pole, in New Amsterdam. By the 1690s, you start seeing Christmas creep back into public life. Church services on December 25th become more common. Not the elaborate rituals the Puritans feared, but something simpler, more Protestant, more acceptable. Ministers preach about the birth of Christ without all the pageantry. No elaborate decorations, no feast days, just the basic story. The revolutionary part? People actually show up. Gift giving takes longer to return. Remember, the Puritans saw presents as frivolous, wasteful, but children are persistent. By the early 1700s, parents start giving small gifts on December 25th. Nothing extravagant, maybe an orange, a piece of candy, a small toy carved from wood. These aren't the elaborate gift exchanges we know today. They're more like tokens, acknowledgments that something special is happening. The Christmas tree doesn't arrive until much later, 1830s, maybe 1840s. German immigrants bring that tradition with them, but even then, it's controversial. Some Protestant churches still see decorated trees as too close to pagan worship. Tree spirits, ancient rituals, the same fears the Puritans had centuries earlier. Change comes slowly when you've been burned by tradition before. What's fascinating is how different regions rebuild Christmas differently. In Philadelphia, Quakers approach it like a quiet family day. In Virginia, Anglican traditions return with more ceremony. Massachusetts, Massachusetts stays cautious the longest. Makes sense, right? They were ground zero for the ban. They remember what happens when Christmas gets too big, too public, too celebratory. Once bitten, twice shy. The food traditions come back gradually, too. Christmas pudding returns by the 1720s, but simpler versions, less alcohol, fewer spices. The Puritans had banned rich foods as signs of excess, so families have to find ways to make Christmas special without seeming indulgent. It's like walking a tightrope between celebration and restraint, between joy and appropriateness. Music presents its own challenges. Christmas carols were specifically banned during the Puritan era. Too festive, too joyful. So when they start coming back, it's through hymns first. Religious songs that happen to be about Christmas. Joy to the World gets written in 1719, but it's presented as a psalm, not a carol, sneaking celebration back in through worship. By 1750, you can see the shape of modern Christmas emerging, families gathering for dinner, children receiving small gifts, church services that acknowledge the holiday without excessive ceremony. But it's still restrained, careful, like everyone's trying to celebrate without calling too much attention to themselves. The ghost of the Puritan ban still haunts every gathering. The Revolutionary War changes everything. Suddenly, rejecting British traditions becomes patriotic. Christmas was never really British anyway, but during the war, anything that seemed European gets questioned. Some families stop celebrating again, not because of religious reasons this time, because of political ones. It's like Christmas can't catch a break in early America. But after the war, that's when Christmas really starts to flourish. The 1780s and 1790s see an explosion of celebration, partly because it's safe now. The Puritan threat is gone. The British threat is gone. Americans can celebrate however they want, and they choose big, elaborate dinners, more gifts, public celebrations, making up for lost time maybe. Washington Irving helps too. His stories about Dutch Christmas traditions in New York make celebration seem American, wholesome, safe, not the wild, drunken festivals the Puritans feared, but family gatherings around the hearth, children laughing, grandparents telling stories. This is the Christmas that survives, the one we recognize today. Domestic, intimate, controlled. By 1800, Christmas looks almost familiar. Stockings hung by fireplaces, special meals shared with family, gifts exchanged on December 25th, churches holding services without apology. But if you look closely, you can still see the Puritan influence, the emphasis on family over community, private celebration over public festival, restraint woven into the joy. The irony is beautiful, isn't it? The Puritans banned Christmas to prevent excess and worldliness. But when it came back bigger, more commercial, more elaborate than ever before. Their 22-year prohibition didn't kill Christmas, it just delayed it, like pressing pause on a celebration that was always going to happen anyway. That's the thing about traditions. You can ban them, outlaw them, fine people for practicing them, but if they mean something to people, if they fill some human need for joy and connection and meaning, they find a way back. Different maybe, changed by the experience, but still recognizable. Still Christmas, the holiday the Puritans couldn't kill. Chapter 11 of Yesteryears and Yuletides. You know what gets me about this whole Christmas ban? It's the small moments, the quiet rebellions, like Sarah Whitmore hiding a sprig of holly in her apron pocket. December 1659, walking past the constable on State Street, heart pounding, knowing that tiny green leaf could cost her family 5 shillings they didn't have. But she kept it anyway, because some things are worth the risk. Picture this, Christmas morning, 1661, the Hartwell family in their cramped cottage outside Boston. No tree, no feast, no gifts, but little Mary Hartwell wakes up to find her mother has sewn her a tiny cloth doll from scraps. Hidden work done by candlelight after everyone slept. Her mother whispers, "Happy birthday, Jesus." That's it. That's their whole celebration. And somehow it feels more sacred than anything. Thomas Fletcher kept a diary during those years. December entries are mostly about work, weather, sermons. But on Christmas Day 1663, he writes this: "The silence feels wrong today. Even the birds seem to know." See, it wasn't just about missing parties or presents. It was about missing rhythm, the natural flow of seasons and celebrations that humans have always needed. The band didn't just outlaw Christmas, it outlawed joy itself. Here's what really happened in those homes. Mothers would hum Christmas carols while kneading bread, but only when they were alone. Fathers would carve little wooden toys in their workshops, then hide them away until spring, giving them as just because gifts months later. Children learned to associate December with emptiness, with watching, with being careful about what you said and who might hear you. Elizabeth Porter was caught singing The Holly and the Ivy while hanging laundry. December 1665. Her neighbor reported her to the magistrates. 5 shilling fine. But here's the thing: Elizabeth couldn't pay, so she spent 3 days in the stocks instead. 3 days in December, cold, hands and feet locked in wood, for singing a song about plants. Think about that, for singing about plants. The children who grew up during the ban, they had these secret signals, little ways to acknowledge Christmas without saying the word. Drawing holly leaves in the dirt with sticks, leaving each other pine cones as gifts, whispering 25th day instead of Christmas Day. They created this whole underground language of celebration, kids finding ways to be kids, even when the adults had forgotten how. John and Mercy Williams had been married 23 years when the band started. Every Christmas before that, Mercy would make her grandmother's apple tart. Same recipe, same kitchen, same love. During the band years, she'd still make it, but on December 23rd or January 2nd, never December 25th. But the taste was never quite right. Something about the wrong day stole the sweetness away. The saddest stories are about the old people, like Samuel Cross, 84 years old in 1667. He'd celebrated Christmas for 8 decades. Suddenly, it's gone. Illegal. Wrong. His grandson found him on Christmas morning, sitting by his window, tears streaming down his face. "I can't remember how to be happy anymore," he said. The ban didn't just change behavior, it changed hearts. But some people found ways to resist that still give me chills. The widow Blackwood would light one extra candle every night in December. When asked why, she'd say it was for reading, but her neighbors knew that candle was counting down to Christmas. 24 nights of quiet rebellion, 24 nights of keeping faith alive in the darkness, one candle at a time. The tavern keepers had it worst, maybe. Christmas had always been their biggest day. Roasted geese, mulled wine, people celebrating until dawn. Now, December 25th was just Tuesday, Quiet Tuesday. Robert Shaw, who ran the King's Arms, said those December nights felt haunted. All that missing laughter echoing in empty rooms, ghosts of Christmas past, quite literally. Here's something that breaks my heart. During the ban, Christmas stockings became underwear. Literally. Mothers would knit them for their children, but call them winter stockings. Practical items, nothing festive, nothing joyful, just warm feet. But late at night, those same mothers would whisper to those stockings, "Santa would have filled you." The stockings became symbols of loss. The ministers preached against Christmas, but some of their own families struggled with it. Reverend Jonathan Mitchell's wife kept a box of cinnamon sticks hidden in their root cellar. Christmas spice. She never used them during the ban, just held them sometimes. Breathed in that scent, remembered what December used to smell like. Even the most devout had moments of doubt. Young couples marrying during the ban years missed something profound. No Christmas weddings, no holiday honeymoons, their December anniversaries forever marked by absence instead of celebration. Mary and Joseph Thornton married December 20th, 1664, 5 days before the banned day, close enough that Christmas shadows fell across their entire marriage. Love, complicated by law. When the ban finally lifted in 1681, something beautiful and heartbreaking happened. People had forgotten how to celebrate. 22 years of suppression had broken the muscle memory of joy. That first legal Christmas was awkward, tentative, like learning to dance after decades of sitting still. Freedom felt strange after so long in chains, even good chains, carefully made. The real tragedy wasn't the fines or the stocks or the missing presents. It was the children who grew up thinking celebration was dangerous, who learned that joy could be criminal, who carried that caution into their own families, their own Christmases. The ban ended, but its shadow stretched across generations. Some wounds take more than laws to heal. But here's what amazes me about these stories. Through all of it, the human spirit kept Christmas alive, in whispered songs, in hidden holly, in extra candles, in the space between laws and love. Those 22 years didn't destroy Christmas. They proved that some things are bigger than governments, bigger than fear. Some lights refuse to be put out. Chapter 12, Celebration's Triumphant Return. December 1681. Boston feels different this year. 22 years of silence, broken. You can sense it in the way people walk past each other. Little nods, shy smiles. Someone hums a melody their grandmother used to sing. Another person lingers by a shop window, watching children play. The fear is lifting, slowly, carefully, but it's lifting, and for the first time in a generation, Christmas might actually happen again. Word spreads quietly at first. Whispered conversations between neighbors. Did you hear? The Mathers might allow it this year. Mrs. Henderson bakes extra bread just in case visitors come calling. Thomas carves a small wooden toy for his son. Nothing fancy, nothing that screams celebration, but something. These tiny acts of hope, these small rebellions against 2 decades of enforced emptiness. People are testing the waters, seeing how far they can push. The first public celebration happens almost by accident. December 20th. A group of children building snowmen near the common. One starts singing, then another joins in. Before anyone realizes what's happening, there's a dozen kids singing Christmas songs right out in the open. Adults stop and stare. Some shake their heads. Others start humming along. The ice is cracking. 22 years of silence, and children are the ones who break it. By Christmas Eve, something magical is happening. Candles appear in windows, up and down the streets. Not many, not bright, but they're there. Families gather closer around their fires. Stories get told. Old songs remembered. Sarah finds her mother's recipe for plum pudding, the one she hid away in 1659. The smell of cinnamon and nutmeg fills the house for the first time in decades. Small acts of defiance becoming moments of pure joy. Christmas morning arrives with fresh snow. Church bells ring, not for Christmas officially, But everyone knows the sound carries differently today, fuller somehow, richer. Families emerge from their homes bundled in wool and hope. Neighbors exchange small gifts, nothing extravagant. A loaf of bread here, a knitted scarf there, simple gestures that feel revolutionary after 22 years of nothing. The town square fills with people who just want to be together. What strikes you most is how careful everyone still is. 22 years of fear doesn't disappear overnight. People celebrate in whispers. Gifts get exchanged behind closed doors. Songs are hummed, not sung out loud. But the joy is unmistakable. You can see it in the way children's eyes light up, the way adults touch each other's hands a little longer, the way strangers nod and smile. Freedom tastes sweeter when you've been without it. By afternoon, the celebrations grow bolder. Someone brings out a fiddle, another person produces a small drum. Music fills the air for the first time in decades. Not hymns, not psalms, Christmas carols, the old ones people thought they'd forgotten. God rest ye merry gentlemen, the holly and the ivy. Voices join in tentatively, at first, then stronger. Tears mix with laughter. This is what they've been missing. This is what they'd almost lost forever. The food appears as if by magic. Tables set up in the square, everyone contributing something: roasted fowl, fresh bread, preserved fruits saved from autumn, hot cider steaming in the cold air. Families who haven't spoken in years find themselves sharing meals, old grievances set aside for this one perfect day. Children run between the tables, sticky-faced and laughing. Their parents watch with wonder, remembering their own childhoods before the ban. The dancing starts at sunset. Nothing elaborate, just people moving to the music, letting their bodies remember rhythms their minds had buried. Young couples sway together. Grandparents clap along from their chairs. Children spin in circles until they're dizzy with joy. The constables watch from the edges, but they don't interfere. Maybe they're tired of enforcement. Maybe they're human too. Maybe some rules are meant to be broken when the heart calls for celebration. As darkness falls, the magic intensifies. Lanterns appear, candles flicker to life. The town square transforms into something from a dream. Faces glow in the warm light. Stories get shared around makeshift fires. Old traditions resurface like flowers after winter. Children hear family legends for the first time. Adults remember why these celebrations mattered to their ancestors. This isn't just about Christmas returning, it's about community healing, about joy reclaiming its rightful place. The embraces happen everywhere you look. Neighbors who've nodded politely for years, suddenly hugging like old friends. Family members reconciling after decades of religious disagreement. Strangers introducing themselves with tears in their eyes. We made it, someone whispers. We survived the darkness. And they had. Through 22 years of enforced joylessness, they'd kept the spark alive, hidden it, protected it, and now it blazes bright enough to warm the whole town. Late into the night, the celebration continues, but softer now, quieter, the wild joy settling into something deeper: contentment, peace. Families gather closer together. Songs become lullabies. The dancing slows to gentle swaying. Children fall asleep in their parents' arms, still wearing their Sunday best. The lanterns burn lower. Voices drop to whispers, but the warmth remains. This feeling, this connection, this is what they'd fought so hard to preserve. As midnight approaches, people begin drifting home, but slowly, reluctantly. Nobody wants this perfect day to end. Final hugs are exchanged. promises made to do this again next year. Children clutch their small gifts, proof that this wasn't just a dream. Parents tuck them into bed still warm with happiness. The town square empties gradually, but the echoes of laughter and song seem to hang in the cold air like visible breath. In houses across Boston, families settle into the deepest sleep they've known in years. The kind of rest that comes after long held tension finally releases. Children dream of music and dancing. Adults rest with smiles still playing at the corners of their mouths. The fear that lived in their bones for 22 years, it's lighter somehow. Not gone entirely, but manageable now. They've proven something today. Joy is stronger than law. Love conquers prohibition. The next morning brings quiet reflection, gentle conversations over breakfast. Did yesterday really happen? But the evidence surrounds them. Leftover food, tired but happy faces, children humming carols while they play. The town feels different, softer, more alive. The harsh edges of Puritan severity have been worn smooth by one perfect day of celebration. Change is coming, slow and steady as melting snow. But it's coming. Christmas has found its way home. And so the celebration winds down, but its effects ripple outward like stones dropped in still water. Boston sleeps peacefully tonight. Families dream of future Christmases. Children wake with hope in their hearts. The long winter of religious prohibition is ending. Spring always follows winter, and joy always finds its way back to the human heart. The story continues, but tonight, let the warmth of this triumph carry you gently into dreams. Chapter 13, The Enduring Spirit of Christmas. Here's what gets me about this whole story. 22 years of bans, fines, public shaming, government officials literally policing joy. And Christmas survived anyway. Not just survived, it came back stronger. That tells you something about the human spirit, doesn't it? About what happens when you try to legislate away something that lives in people's hearts. The Puritans learned this the hard way. Think about those secret celebrations during the ban years, families gathering behind closed doors, sharing small gifts when no one was looking, whispering Christmas greetings to trusted neighbors. The holiday went underground, but it never went away. It adapted, changed form, became something quieter, maybe more precious because it was forbidden. That's resilience. That's the Christmas spirit, finding a way to breathe, even when it's being suffocated. By the 1680s, you could feel the shift happening. The strict Puritan grip was loosening. New immigrants brought their own traditions. English influence crept back in. Merchants realized Christmas meant business, and business meant survival in the colonies. The holiday began its slow crawl back into public life. Not the wild carnival Christmas of Old England, but something new, something uniquely American was being born from all this conflict. What fascinates me is how communities held on to the spirit even when they couldn't hold on to the celebration. Neighbors still helped neighbors through harsh winters. Families still gathered for warmth and connection. The generosity, the togetherness, the hope, these things lived in different forms. Call it Christmas or don't call it Christmas. The human need for light in the darkness, that's universal. That's unstoppable. The Christmas that emerged after the ban wasn't the same as the one before. It was quieter, more family-centered, less about wild public festivities, more about intimate gatherings. The Puritans, ironically, had helped create something closer to what many of us think of as traditional Christmas today. Cozy, reflective, focused on home and hearth rather than street parties and excessive drinking. Their attempt to kill Christmas had transformed it instead. Here's the thing about trying to ban joy: it doesn't work. People find ways. They always find ways. During the ban, Christmas spirit showed up as winter charity, as community barn raisings in December, as neighbors sharing firewood without being asked. You can't legislate kindness out of existence. You can't find your way out of human connection. The Puritans discovered what authoritarian movements always discover: the spirit is stronger than the law. Fast forward to today. We're still living with echoes of that Puritan Christmas, the American version of the holiday. It's got this interesting tension built in: religious but also secular, commercial but also deeply personal, public but also private. That complexity, it comes from those early struggles, from generations of people figuring out how to celebrate in a culture that was simultaneously embracing and rejecting the holiday. The lesson here isn't really about Christmas, is it? It's about resilience, about how cultures evolve under pressure. The Puritans thought they could create a pure society by controlling celebration. Instead, they taught us that human joy is remarkably adaptable, persistent, creative. Push it down here, it pops up there. Try to contain it, it finds new forms. That's not just Christmas history, that's human history. What strikes me most is the quiet heroism in all this. Not the big dramatic moments, but the small acts of defiance. A mother humming a carol while baking bread, a father carving a small toy in secret, children learning songs they couldn't sing out loud. These weren't revolutionaries, they were just people holding on to something beautiful in a harsh world. That's the real Christmas spirit right there. The gradual return of Christmas in New England happened slowly, quietly. No grand declarations, no official ceremonies marking the end of the ban, just families slowly, carefully adding back traditions: a wreath on a door, a special meal, small gifts exchanged. The holiday crept back into American life, the same way it had crept out: one household, one community, one heart at a time. By the 1700s, Christmas was becoming distinctly American in character, not quite English anymore, definitely not Puritan. Something new, less raucous than the medieval versions, more inclusive than the strict religious observance the Puritans had rejected. It was finding its own rhythm, its own voice. The holiday that emerged from this conflict would eventually spread across the continent, carrying with it this uniquely American blend of celebration and restraint. The enduring spirit of Christmas, it's not really about December 25th, is it? It's about what that date represents: hope in dark times, generosity when resources are scarce, connection when isolation threatens, light when everything feels dim. The Puritans could ban the date, the feasts, the decorations, but they couldn't ban the human need for these things. And that need, that's what kept Christmas alive through 22 years of winter. Looking back, the Christmas ban era taught America something important about itself, about the balance between order and freedom, between community standards and personal choice, between religious conviction and human joy. These tensions didn't disappear when the ban ended. They became part of the American Christmas experience. We're still negotiating them today, 3 centuries later, still figuring out what celebration means in a diverse society. The people who kept Christmas alive during those ban years, they left us something precious. They showed us that the things we truly value can't be legislated away, that joy is stronger than authority, that human connection transcends political control. They whispered carols in dark winters and emerged into the light still singing. That's courage. That's faith. That's the enduring spirit of Christmas. and it's still here with us tonight. As we wind down this story, I keep thinking about those secret Christmas moments during the ban, the hidden gifts, the whispered prayers, the quiet gatherings. There's something profound about celebration that must stay hidden to survive. It becomes more precious somehow, more intentional. The Christmas that emerged from the Puritan ban carried that intentionality forward, that appreciation for what could be lost if we don't protect it. The enduring spirit of Christmas lives on because people chose to keep it alive when keeping it alive was dangerous. They chose joy over compliance, connection over isolation, hope over fear. And in making those choices, generation after generation, they created something that no law could touch, something that lives in the space between heartbeats, in the pause between breaths, in the quiet moments when we choose light over darkness. That's where Christmas really lives. Chapter 14, A Heartfelt Recollection. Looking back at those 22 years, what strikes me most isn't the harshness of the ban itself. It's how it reveals something deeper about human nature. When you try to erase joy, people find ways around it. They always do. The Puritans thought they could legislate holiness, control how people felt about December 25th. But here's what they learned the hard way. You can't ban the human heart from wanting celebration. Think about it for a moment. These were people who fled England to escape religious oppression. They crossed an ocean, risked everything for the freedom to worship as they chose. Then what do? They banned Christmas, created their own version of the very thing they ran from. The irony is almost heartbreaking. Good intentions twisted into something they never meant to become. Power has this way of corrupting even the purest motives, doesn't it? But here's what gets me about this whole story. The ordinary people caught in the middle. Sarah Miller, fined for hanging evergreen branches. Thomas Webb, arrested for sharing plum pudding with neighbors. These weren't rebels or troublemakers. They were just human, missing the warmth of old traditions, wanting something beautiful in the gray December cold. Sometimes the most radical act is simply refusing to let your heart grow hard. The lesson here runs deeper than Christmas or Puritans. It's about what happens when fear drives policy, when leaders get so worried about corruption, about outside influences, that they forget why they're leading in the first place. The Puritan ministers weren't evil men. They genuinely believed they were protecting their community's soul. But good intentions don't excuse the damage done when you try to control how people love and celebrate. What fascinates me is how the ban slowly crumbled, not through dramatic rebellion, but through quiet persistence. A merchant here, a family there, children asking why their neighbors got presents and they didn't. Change rarely happens with grand gestures. It happens when enough individual hearts decide they've had enough of being afraid, when ordinary courage becomes a quiet revolution. That's how Christmas came back to New England, one household at a time. And Governor Andros, when he forced that Christmas service in 1686, I used to think he was just being political, flexing royal power, but maybe there was something deeper there. Maybe he understood what the Puritan leaders had forgotten, that joy isn't the enemy of faith, that celebration doesn't corrupt the soul. Sometimes it takes an outsider to remind us of what we've lost. Sometimes authority needs to be challenged, gently but firmly. The real tragedy wasn't the ban itself, it was how it poisoned relationships. Neighbors reporting neighbors, children confused about why happiness was dangerous, families divided over whether to light a candle or share a meal. When you make love illegal, when you criminalize joy, you don't create holiness, you create suspicion, fear. A community where people are afraid to care too much about anything beautiful. That's not God's work. That's something much darker. But here's what gives me hope in this story. People kept finding ways to care for each other. They couldn't call it Christmas, so they called it friendship, hospitality, simple human kindness. The spirit survived even when the name was forbidden. Love always finds a way around walls. Always. That might be the most important lesson of all. You cannot legislate the human heart. You cannot ban what makes us most deeply human, and the children in all this that breaks my heart the most. Growing up thinking celebration was wrong, that joy meant corruption, that their natural desire for wonder and magic was somehow sinful. How many childhoods were dimmed by this fear? How many young hearts learned to distrust their own happiness? Children shouldn't have to choose between obedience and wonder. They deserve both. They deserve leaders wise enough to understand the difference between protecting innocence and crushing it. The English merchants who kept importing Christmas goods, they knew something the ministers didn't, that people will always hunger for beauty, for tradition, for connections to something larger than their daily struggles. You can ban the tree, the feast, the gifts, but you can't ban the longing. The human soul doesn't function by legislation, it functions by love, by memory, by hope that this dark December will give way to something bright. When I think about Increase Mather and his warnings about Christmas, I wonder what he was really afraid of. Was it the celebration itself, or was it losing control? Sometimes the people who talk most about protecting tradition are the ones most afraid of its actual power. Real tradition doesn't need protection. It doesn't need laws. It needs love, understanding, the humility to admit when we've lost our way, and the courage to find it again. The gradual return of Christmas teaches us something beautiful about resilience, about how light seeps through the smallest cracks. A shared meal became a celebration. A small gift became an act of rebellion. Children's laughter became a theology lesson, not the kind the ministers intended, but maybe the kind God actually wanted. Sometimes wisdom comes not from the pulpit, but from the kitchen table, from mothers who refuse to let December pass without wonder. What strikes me most about this whole 22-year period, it wasn't really about Christmas at all. It was about power, about fear, about what happens when good people make terrible choices because they're terrified of losing what they love. The Puritans loved God, loved their community, but love twisted by fear becomes something else entirely. It becomes control, and control, even with the best intentions, eventually destroys what it's trying to protect. But maybe that's the most important lesson here, that people can change, communities can heal, even the deepest wounds can become wisdom if we're brave enough to face them honestly. New England eventually embraced Christmas again, not because they had to, but because they remembered what they'd lost. Sometimes we have to walk through the darkness to appreciate the light. Sometimes the best celebrations come after the longest winters. So when you're celebrating Christmas this year, or any holiday really, remember Sarah Miller, remember Thomas Webb, remember all the ordinary people who risked fines and jail time just to hang a green branch or share a sweet cake. They weren't fighting for Christmas specifically. They were fighting for the right to let their hearts be full, for the freedom to find joy in dark times. That's worth remembering. That's worth protecting. And maybe, just maybe, when we're tempted to judge others for how they celebrate or don't celebrate, we can remember this story. Remember how quickly good intentions can become rigid rules, how easily protection becomes oppression. The Puritans thought they were saving souls. Instead, they nearly lost their own. The heart wants what it wants. Love finds a way. Joy refuses to stay buried. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply celebrating. Chapter 15, Christmas Forevermore. And here we are, the end of a long journey. From band celebrations to beloved traditions, Christmas didn't just return to America, it became America, woven into the fabric of who we are as a people. Every December, millions of families gather, light candles, share meals, exchange gifts. The very things the Puritans once feared now bring us together in ways they never imagined possible. Think about it for a moment. That little flame of tradition, the one they tried so hard to snuff out in 1659, it never really died. It just waited, quietly, patiently, in the hearts of immigrants who brought their customs across the ocean, in children who remembered their grandparents' stories, in merchants who understood what people truly wanted: joy, connection, a reason to hope when winter feels endless. The transformation happened slowly, generously. By the 1800s, Christmas was blooming everywhere you looked. Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol arrived in America like a warm embrace. Washington Irving's stories painted pictures of cozy celebrations. And then came the immigrants: Irish, German, Italian families, each adding their own beautiful threads to the tapestry. Christmas became richer, deeper, more wonderfully complicated than before. The Christmas tree tradition took root first in Pennsylvania. German settlers brought their Tannenbaum customs. Soon, families across America were dragging evergreens into their parlors, decorating them with candles, paper angels, small treats. Children would wake on Christmas morning to find their tree transformed overnight. Magic had officially entered the American home. The Puritans' worst nightmare had become everyone's favorite dream. Gift giving evolved too. What started as simple treats, apples, nuts, small handmade toys, grew into something more elaborate. Department stores caught on quickly. Macy's, Wanamaker's, they understood the power of Christmas morning. By the 1870s, shopping for Christmas had become its own celebration. Americans were learning that giving gifts felt just as wonderful as receiving them, maybe even better. And the food, oh, the beautiful food traditions that emerged: roasted turkey or ham, cranberry sauce, sweet potatoes, pumpkin pie, Christmas cookies cut into stars and angels. Each family developed their own special recipes, passed down through generations. Food became memory, comfort, love made edible, the opposite of those sparse Puritan meals of centuries past. Music filled the celebration too. Christmas carols that had been whispered in secret during the ban now rang out boldly. Silent Night, Joy to the World, O Come All Ye Faithful. These songs became the soundtrack of American December. Church choirs, school pageants, families gathered around pianos. Music had the power to heal old wounds, to remind everyone what they'd been missing. Children became the heart of Christmas. Where Puritans once worried about corruption, Americans saw pure wonder. Little faces pressed against frosted windows, stockings hung hopefully by fireplaces, letters to Santa Claus written in careful cursive. Childhood imagination transformed Christmas into something magical again, something worth protecting, worth celebrating, worth passing on to the next generation. Even the weather seemed to cooperate. Those New England winters that once made survival so desperate, now they provided the perfect backdrop for Christmas magic. Snow falling gently on church steeples, icicles hanging like nature's ornaments, frozen ponds becoming ice skating rinks. Winter stopped being something to merely endure. It became part of the celebration itself. Communities came together in ways the Puritans never anticipated. Christmas pageants at local schools, neighborhood caroling, church services overflowing with candlelight and hope. People who might disagree about politics or business found common ground in Christmas joy. The holiday became a bridge, a shared language of kindness when words weren't enough to express what hearts felt. And slowly, quietly, Christmas began healing old divisions. Families who'd been torn apart by arguments found reasons to forgive. Neighbors who'd grown distant remembered how to be kind. The holiday created space for second chances, fresh starts, clean slates. Maybe that's what the Puritans had actually been afraid of. Not the celebrating, but the forgiving, the softening of hard hearts. By the early 1900s, Christmas had become unmistakably American. President Roosevelt put the first official White House Christmas tree in 1902. Department store Santas became neighborhood celebrities. Christmas cards flew through the postal system by the millions. What had once been forbidden was now woven so deeply into American culture that life without Christmas seemed impossible to imagine. The Great Depression couldn't stop Christmas, neither could two world wars. Families made do with less, homemade gifts, simple meals, creative decorations, but they never stopped celebrating, never stopped believing in the magic. Hard times revealed something important about Christmas in America. It wasn't about abundance, it was about connection, hope, the promise that better days were coming. Today, Christmas touches every corner of American life, from the smallest rural towns to the biggest cities. Different families, different traditions, but the same underlying spirit. Lights twinkling in windows, children's laughter echoing through homes, the smell of cookies baking, carols playing softly on radios, peace settling over the land like fresh snow, gentle and pure and beautiful. And here's what's really wonderful. Christmas keeps evolving, new traditions mixing with old ones, different cultures adding their own special touches. The celebration that the Puritans tried so hard to control has become something bigger than anyone could have imagined, something that belongs to everyone, something that brings out the best in people when they need it most. So as you drift off to sleep tonight, remember this journey from fear to joy, from prohibition to celebration, from division to unity. Christmas found its way back to America because it was always meant to be here, in our hearts, in our homes, in our dreams of peace and goodwill. Sweet dreams, and may your Christmas be merry and bright, always